Your position is, I think,
15 years ago, when the search for the Mary Rose began in earnest, it was conducted from fishing boats hired for the day for a few pounds, shillings and pence. In the last 3 years, the Mary Rose Trust has learned to think in millions. This is the story of the greatest exercise in underwater archaeology that Great Britain has ever known. Chronicle has been reporting on the Mary Rose project for more than 10 years, and will report from the surface and the seabed as the hull comes up tomorrow. It is a great romantic story about a historian and amateur diver who defied all the experts who said the ship was lost. About a prince who lent his name, his personality, his goodwill and his energy to support a major public gamble. About a skilled land archaeologist who devoted herself to the project, learned to dive, and ended up as one of the foremost underwater archaeologists in the world. Most of all, it is the story of a ship named after Henry VIII's sister, which sank before the king's eyes on a hot summer Sunday in July 1545. 700 men died on this site in battle against the French. The crew, with their equipment, lay entombed for more than 400 years in thick grey clay. This film is the story of the last few months of excavation and engineering on the wreck of the Mary Rose. At the beginning of 1982, a team of professional divers, employed by the Mary Rose Trust, began to work towards the lifting of the hull of this legendary lost ship. The weather in the Solent was often treacherous and difficult, both for sailors and for divers on the surface and underneath. Archaeologists and divers from the Mary Rose Trust were now joined by divers from the Royal Engineers. Their particular responsibility was the heavy work, preparing the seabed round the wreck for the installation of an underwater lifting frame and lifting cradle.
Well, this is a once-in-a-lifetime pleasure, really. It's something that we are doing now that we could never hope to do again in our lifetime. The chances of finding a 450-year-old wreck to get us to dive on it is, again, it's pretty remote. So the lads are, you know, sort of thoroughly involved and thoroughly pleased with the fact that they are doing it.
Meanwhile, the Mary Rose Trust divers, working underneath the remains of the stern, still had some delicate tasks to perform. A lot of archaeological evidence was to be found outside and underneath the ship. The different types of silt and the seaweed lenses and layers tell an archaeologist the story of how the site has changed over the centuries. This section was being prepared for sketching and photography. On May the 1st, the archaeologists and volunteers returned to the site in force. They aimed to work 2 12-hour shifts, to dive and excavate all round the clock. There were 24 of them, working in 2 teams. Their target was, in 4 or 5 weeks, to empty the ship completely, to clear the decks, as it were, for the technical and engineering work still to be done. Very little was left underwater in the ship. But there were still banks of clay in the lower decks, which might conceal nests of barrels or coils of tarry rope. In the hold, there was a substantial heap of bricks, the remains of the firebox where the ship's company prepared its food. To excavate all night was a wearing and a potentially hazardous schedule. It seemed to stand the whole day on its head, for the divers and for their support staff. The work came to dominate their lives. Did it have to come first all the time?
It does, and when we started off, we planned this season around having to follow the westerly tides around because the stuff we wanted to remove from the hull was on the west side of the ship, basically. So on this particular shift, we picked the straw that made us work at night. And it's like working a night shift, I suppose, in a factory, but it becomes totally confusing because you don't know whether it's Saturday, Monday, Tuesday, or anything else. And it is a matter of disciplining yourself to go home during the day and sleep, if you possibly can.
There have been a certain number of headaches, obviously, with trying out a new diving system towards the end of an excavation programme. But the night diving itself has produced very little problems. We've only taken experienced divers, divers who know the site. We haven't taken any new volunteers this year, and we've hand-picked from a selection of people who we felt were able to do the job quickly and efficiently.
Very well, and morale is high, which again is something which I thought would be quite a difficult thing. Because if you're getting people to come on at night and get ready to dive at 2 in the morning and then off for when the next shift comes on, and do that for 17 or 18 days, well then you think that they might get a bit upset after a while, and morale might go down, and then it won't work as smoothly. But in fact, that's not happened at all. Everybody's very cheerful and working well.
It was very difficult. I found myself writing letters home telling people how difficult this season was, as opposed to all the other seasons I've ever done. Because apart from the archaeology, there's a safety factor involved, obviously. And we had to work with underwater lighting, and our mains lights were a bit finicky. So we found ourselves relying on flashlights or head-mounted torches. And sometimes we'd find ourselves running low on batteries. And the work was very, very difficult. And it was one of the most frustrating things to know that you had the people and you had the time, but you didn't have the lights. And not being able to see was a real struggle.
The timber crosspiece, or stock, from one of the anchors of King Henry VIII's battleship. Difficult to see, to survey, and to comprehend even in daylight, it lay half under the hull. This ring was at the top of the shank. Safety precautions were as tight as they could be throughout the month of the archaeological season. The safety boat was run out regularly, not only to check it, but, as in this case, to make sure that a shiny object in the water was an empty beer can and not a diver's mask. Working underneath the decks, even during the day, was often a lonely experience. The work was hard. The mass of the ship could seem threatening instead of familiar. Near the site of the bricks in the hold, several heavy sheets of lead had to be floated away with airbags and carefully stowed off the site. When that had been done, it would be possible to remove some of the bricks, to see what was under and beside them, to attempt to understand the structure. It was quite difficult to decide how much detail it was necessary to record, and whether each individual brick should be numbered, tagged, sketched, and logged. At some stage, a reconstruction will be attempted. No one has ever seen a ship's galley built quite like this. The whole process took many hours of diving, by day and by night. But on the 16th of May at 2 in the morning, the crane was ready to lift the first load of bricks to the surface. On deck, the finds assistants begin the task of tagging, cataloguing, and listing all the bricks.
25.
They were also working through the night, like the archaeologists and the volunteers.
50.
The bricks were all handmade, often rather curious and irregular shapes. Every one was different. You can see the paw marks of a cat, which ran across the clay before this brick was fired.
105.
Marks on the bricks appeared at first to be from the fire used in cooking,
48.
Tudor soot. The Mary Rose has become a way of life for many people. Everyone has had to be dedicated. When it's all over, what will they all feel?
the end of an era, really. End of what has been quite a challenge. It's the end of it's the realisation of the dream that Alex McKee had all those years ago to see the remains of this ship on shore.
Southampton Water, June 1982. The QE2 came home from the Falklands. Rejoicing on one side of the anchorage, and on the other, the engineering work to raise the Mary Rose went on unabated. At the Royal Engineers base at Marchwood, just across the river, the frame which will support the Mary Rose when she is lifted had been rigged with its legs and slung underneath a large barge. The barge had been equipped with lifting gear and diving equipment, and all the paraphernalia necessary for a major technical operation. But the work was running substantially behind schedule. The frame had been launched on time on the 31st of March. The original target was to lower the legs of the frame onto the seabed in early April. Rigging and fitting the frame had caused a succession of delays and minor problems. The operation was too involved to be easy to keep to schedule. The master of the Mary Rose Trust's support vessel was working closely with the engineers.
Even now, today, we're still waiting for some welding to be done. We can handle the workload. It just means working through Saturday and Sunday. This is nothing fresh to us. And we just have to put up with that and try and get everything ready.
The tow downriver on Monday the 14th of June was a stately occasion. The frame beneath the barge could be torn off and damaged if the barge were towed too quickly. All went well. The first major item of lifting equipment arrived safely at the site. To complicate the issue, one of the mooring ropes had come adrift just as the barge arrived. Divers were sent down to recover it.
Hey, Bravo, this is CSB, over. CSB, Bravo 2. CSB, I've sent another diver down. We won't be able to get the chain. The chain's, as I said, an arm length in the mud. What I've done, we've connected to the only part of the chain we found, and he's going to try and locate the nylon cord, hopefully that hasn't sunk into the mud, and locate it that way, over.
Roger, it's John Adams here. I'll just go and tell that to Barry, okay, over?
CSB, understood.
The position of the barge had to be just right. The frame had to be just above the wreck before the legs could be lowered. Personnel from the Mary Rose salvage team worked side by side with the engineers throughout. The frame weighed more than 60 tons in air. The fragile wooden wreck could be irreparably damaged if anything went wrong. The frame was inched into position.
it's slightly too far to the east. If we want to get her back this way, we need her that way in order to get this lifting frame further over this way.
They're trying to see what they can do with the winch at the moment, John. I'll put it to Sam and see what he says. In the meantime, we'll see what we can do with this winch, alright?
Yeah, roger. Now, if we can't do anything in the winch, is it worth borrowing a couple of the nylons we got on this barge and running a nylon out to that buoy and putting the nylon back through the hawse hole to the capstan?
Maybe, John, but I don't think the capstan will take it myself. We're pretty tight on the rest of the moorings. If we move around too much, we'll have to rub something through, over.
Oh, well, we'll wait until we find out what's going to happen about that winch then.
I think it's superb. I mean, to see this heavy ironmongery going into position is very important. It is an essential stage in the project. We can't begin tunnelling till we have this equipment in position, and we have a lot of tunnelling to do in the next few months. But basically, I won't be happy till those heavy legs are down securely in the seabed and everything is finished. This is just one part of that work.
The next morning saw the start of the most delicate stage of the operation.
Straight through the eye, okay, and then back up the top and put the shackle through all four. Three. Straight through the eye, back. Okay, that's fine. Let the right length now. You can hold that in, sir.
Now it is a question of rigging wires to the top of each of the legs so that they can be lowered individually and accurately into the holes prepared for them.
No, made an eye at it. At the other end up as well. Yeah, let's have the other end as well. Let's get the next.
The Mary Rose Trust's archaeologists and divers on the support vessel watched a little anxiously. The Royal Engineers were carrying out the work, led by Captain John Branham.
Get those legs below the water.
The Mary Rose Trust's Director of Recovery, Colonel Wendell Lewis, was also on board the barge. The position of the barge was critical. Margaret Rule put her own divers in the water to monitor the placing of the legs.
Understood. We've nudged a bit. Can Chris report when she's settled?
Surface Roger, we'll start to move shortly. Wait up. Right. I want to move the stern 1 metre to port. Yeah. Can you get Sam to organise it, and I'll tell you stop when they... Can you leave me that? Got her. Yeah, nice and steady.
The Royal Engineers Combat Support Boat, capable of 25 knots in 18 inches of water, was used to shove the barge from side to side. Minute by minute, the divers reported from the seabed.
The leg can be lowered. The leg can be lowered.
Surface Roger, we will in fact have to move slightly starboard. We're still swinging the stern. Wait up.
The frame was trimmed and lowered deeper on the winches.
Same again, 1 metre.
This leg, at the starboard quarter, was over the highest portion of the wreck.
Okay, where you go? Bob.
When the shackle came adrift, the leg plunged to within a metre of the ship.
Keep on the surface of it, don't go underneath. Have a look at the strop line, see if can I put a set on us doing it. No, you should be doing it from the surface and then just push yourself back on.
Watch yourself,
Okay, splash it.
The scale of the structure underwater was hard to grasp from the surface. The frame was enormous, 37 meters long and 17 meters wide. The legs were 8 meters high. To position the feet accurately in disturbed visibility was almost impossible.
Can we move at all to the south? Yeah. That's why I ask it somewhat cautiously. Chris relates we are grinding against the edge of the pit.
Roger. I think we're trying a gentle move to the side.
A gentle nudge, I should think, might help.
At the end of the day, the 4 feet were firmly planted in the clay beneath the loose silts which have preserved the ship. The frame was level and remained so when it settled in the next few days. No one seemed especially elated or excited.
I'm a bit more optimistic now this frame's gone in as to the future of the project. I think having got off to the bad start, we've got over that. We've got the lifting frame in, which is a major piece of equipment on the seabed. Now we can look forward to progressing a bit quicker.
Dropping the frame into position was only the beginning of the operation. The transoms, the great cross beams from which the hull will be suspended, still needed to be installed. Each of the transoms weighs 2 tons in air. Divers from the Mary Rose Trust and the Royal Engineers worked together throughout. The positioning of the support vessel was again critical. There were 11 transoms to be fitted, and a pair took at least half a day to maneuver into position, lower and rig. Some divers managed the work more smoothly than others. Time was becoming desperately short. Not until the frame was complete could the tunnelling and rigging, the most difficult jobs, begin.
Sam, same again. Same again.
The degradation in the uppermost timbers of the hull was obvious. Every dive contributed to the general wear and tear. The massive frame had been installed safely, but delay would damage the hull as seriously as any accident. When the Mary Rose sank, she lay on her side, with her masts protruding from the water. The masts and spars were removed in Tudor times, and the upper side of the hull collapsed downwards. All that is left of the Mary Rose is her starboard side. The remains of her decks and deck beams are already on the surface. Installing the lifting frame above the wreck was the first stage of the salvage operation. Next, divers will drill holes in the hull and tunnel underneath it to rig wires to the transoms. Then a crane will lift the frame and hull a few meters sideways to mate with a support cradle underwater. What remains of the Mary Rose, cushioned by airbags and cradled in ironmongery, will then be lifted delicately through the surface in its protective box and placed on a barge to take it back to Portsmouth Harbour. The whole project is costing millions. At receptions like this one in the City of London, the Mary Rose Trust invites businessmen and industrialists to dig deep into their pockets. Prince Charles, the president of the Mary Rose Trust, attended and spoke on this occasion.
So after 17 years, the Mary Rose will be raised in 1982, in October. And it's rather fun to think, or hope anyway, that our child will be born in the year that the Mary Rose was raised. And already I've been receiving letters suggesting we should call it Mary Rose if it's a girl, or even Henry Charles if it's a boy. But anyway, whatever the case, I shall look forward to seeing that ship rise above the murky waters of the Solent. And I'm also hoping to go down to dive on the Mary Rose in April, and I shall be most interested to see how they're getting on.
Prince Charles has dived on the Mary Rose site a total of 9 times since 1975. He has rarely had a good look at the ship. The visibility always seems to close down when he comes to the Solent. He is genuinely interested in archaeology and history, and his enthusiasm for the Mary Rose project has made an enormous difference to it. You have to be something of an enthusiast to dive in the Solent.
Any dive you do, there's always an element of apprehension, isn't there? You never quite know what's going to happen. You just hope that you're going to do the right things and react in the right way. But like diving today, it has renewed my admiration for all the divers who work here. They really do a fantastic job, I think.
On shore, the activity necessary to service the work afloat and pay for it redoubled in intensity as 1982 went on. At the Trust's headquarters in Old Portsmouth, new equipment was brought in and the staff were taught to use it. The word processor is on loan from a local firm. The press office is equipped on a strictly traditional basis, with an ashtray, a telephone, and a typewriter operated with 2 fingers by a former journalist.
We have, in the great traditions of the project, to beg, borrow and steal everything. Until a couple of months ago, our biggest spending item was my little tin of postage stamps and the odd telephone call.
Downstairs, the fines assistants are still washing arrows, thousands and thousands of them. They're now dealing with the last few fragments. Timber from the upper levels of the site, found several years ago. The degradation is obvious. The hull itself, buried deep in the silts, is in much better condition. These old timbers are checked and sprayed with a borax fungicide and eventually repackaged. Many thousands of such fragments have been brought to the surface. This storage area at the Trust's headquarters is only one of the places where objects from the wreck are kept. Many thousands of items have been found, and the conservators will be at work for years. Virtually all the artifacts, and some of the timbers, are drawn with meticulous care by a skilled team of draftsmen and women. The eye can distinguish and record detail better than any camera. These hand-carved linstocks for igniting the cannon were common items on board the ship. Debbie Fulford is the Trust's senior illustrator.
Especially on the Mary Rose, you never quite know what you're going to find. You get such a variety of work. It's nice to get such decorated objects here as you do get, and things that people have never seen before. I'm very interested by all the different shoes because not very much is known about Tudor shoes. There's never been such a wide selection of them around before. Shoe specialists like to see the different parts that make up the shoe so they know exactly how they were made. So we try to draw pieces as flat as possible and indicate whether we're drawing the grain side or the flesh side, which is very important to specialists. When you're drawing, you can emphasize the stitch holes and the stitching or the punch decoration. These drawings are of a pewter flagon. The different views show here the cross-section of the flagon, plus a detail of how the handle was made. This shows a view of the top of the flagon with the incised decoration and marks which are possibly owner's marks, and on the handle, the stamped maker's mark. These are 3 different rulers that have recently been found on the Mary Rose, and again, the markings and the numbers on the ruler show up better in the drawing. There's some quite interesting numbers, the 10s back to front, and there's a line through the 0. The 7s on its side, and the 6 is rather strange. It's quite interesting to emphasise these kind of details. Here we've got 3 different sundials. The one at the top here is drawn at 1:1. This one is bound in leather with a wooden case inside it. These 2 sundials are drawn at 2:1. It was drawn as usual before conservation. During conservation, this gnomon, which is usually raised up to cast a shadow, was removed, and these 2 heads were seen underneath. It looks like a king and queen.
One of the most exciting finds this year was a magnificent bronze bell, marked with a Tudor rose, and an inscription confirming the date when the ship was built, 1510, just a year after Henry VIII came to the throne. The bell joins exotic items like this ivory manicure set and commonplace items like these thimbles and the miniature dice in storage until the Mary Rose Museum is built. "14,000 objects have been found in the hull of the Mary Rose, a treasure trove of information and a delight to look at. One of them is quite surprising.
This is the coat of arms of Lord Lisle, the Lord High Admiral, who was not on board the Mary Rose at all the day the ship sank. He was about 1/3 of a mile away on his flagship, the Henry Grâce-à-Dieu. And he survived the whole battle to be decapitated as a traitor on Tower Green some years later. But the discovery of his coat of arms amongst the many pewter plates found on board the Mary Rose shows one of the problems of archaeology underwater. If this were a tumbled, scattered underwater wreck site, we would perhaps be tempted to say that it was one of the ships of Lord Lisle with his own personal possessions on board. But the Mary Rose is rather different. It is a closed group of finds, sealed and stratified within the half hull of a ship that died at one particular moment in time. It's this total assemblage of material, this closed group of finds, which is of real importance. Pewter flagons from the officers' quarters, and some of the dozens of pewter plates. Alongside the wooden platters and wooden bowls of the ordinary seamen, and the stave-built drinking tankards with their crude graffiti showing the owner's mark. We have fine combs, spoons, a rather dainty pomander, where one could insert the herbs and spices and swing them about to make the air on board ship a little less fetid than it might have been. Much of this material, the pewter plates, the wooden bowls, and a lot of the drinking vessels came from the galley area, from the storage area close to the main galley in the hold of the ship. And there were 4 large cauldrons made of copper, built into a great brick support. And these would be the mess cauldrons where all of the food was boiled together to present some sort of nauseous stew. And a barrel of wooden platters nearby were the storage bowls for the seamen to eat from. In other areas of the ship, we have leather buckets, several of them, lined with pitch to make them waterproof, and inventories of ships of this period. Some of them contain 8 dozen buckets. Carpenter's tools, made by the craftsmen who used them. Only the metal blades have been destroyed, but the plane is otherwise entire, and we can reconstruct planes of this type and see just how they were used on board the ship. Individually handmade, like these knife sheaths, carved by the owner, and some of them with the most intriguing zoomorphic graffiti on the sides, which tell us a little bit about the personality and the artistic talents of the men who made them. Very simple kidney dagger handles, some crude, some quite finely fashioned. The steel blades missing, but the wooden handles, which don't survive on land sites, preserved here inside the ship. Personal clothing. This is one of the archer's front pieces of his leather jerkin, slashed across the chest to give freedom of movement as he drew the longbow. And some of the many dozens of leather shoes, some finely decorated and others rather clodhopperish, built for a man of action. Got a small selection of some of the anti-personnel weapons used on board the ship here. Wrought iron swivel guns, breech loading with little separate chambers which could be filled with a powder charge, several of these to each gun, drop them into position and fire a small lead shot, pretty short range, against the enemy as he tried to come on board. And here we have a hail shot piece, a cast iron weapon with a single seam along the length of the barrel. A rectangular bore, and the wooden tompion was in position when it was found, and behind the tompion some square iron dice, fired at absolute point-blank range by hooking this triangular piece over a bulwark rail to absorb the recoil and then discharging it in the enemy's face. We have bronze reamers used for clearing out the touch hole of a cast bronze gun. And another piece of anti-personnel weaponry, a stave-built container for very sharp, jagged flints, just roughly warped flints with crude cutting edges still there, placed inside the container and discharged at the enemy, again at point-blank range.
The Mary Rose is empty now. The contents of the ship are safe on shore. But the hull itself, the ultimate artifact, has still to be recovered. Divers are hard at work, scouring great pits under the side and stern of the ship, revealing the timbers in their original condition, as they were when she hit the seabed, when she sank. The orange patches show where iron has migrated into the wood. The timbers are sound and strong, undamaged by time and mud and water. The broken bow has been sawn off neatly, and the section rigged ready to be lifted. The whole ship is to be drilled and rigged in this way. To spread the load evenly, the Mary Rose Trust divers need to drill 150 holes in the main timbers, often in very low visibility. Once the holes have been drilled, large eye bolts are fitted, with rubber and timber packing to spread the load, and wire strops to attach the bolts and the timbers of the hull to the underwater lifting frame. On the surface, the site is dominated now by the massive jib of one of the largest lifting barges in the world, capable of raising 2 Mary Roses simultaneously. The crane hovered like a hungry insect above the diving support vessel belonging to the Mary Rose Trust. Its jib was visible 5 miles away. Its first task was to drop the support cradle into position. There was a lot of work still to be done before the hull could come up.
When we lift the Mary Rose from the seabed, it will be a minor miracle. It's been tough going, a tough year with lots of discussions, and I believe we've now got it right. I think we can do it. We can lift the ship from the seabed, move her gently across underwater, locate her, the legs of the lifting frame, in the feet of this cradle, using sonar docking, acoustic navigational aids to dock the legs with the feet very exactly, and then very gently jack her down into that supporting structure. When we've done that, and that's all underwater, then we smile. The lift into air is just a perfectly straightforward piece of lifting into air. We have excellent equipment to do it with, it's straightforward. We can do it even up to the end of November, if needs be. But the movement underwater and the docking is crucial, and we have to do that within the next few weeks.
What could go wrong?
The most important thing, I think, is that when we put her down, we find she doesn't fit. Then we, I think, get the next boat to South America, because if she doesn't fit, we have a problem. We have to fabricate on the seabed, and that will be difficult. And if the weather keeps up like this, we'll never do it.